Hello, welcome for Accelerator. I'm your host Zoo, and today we are starting a brand new series of beginner tutorials for complete beginners to Civilization 6. I will be assuming that you have the Gathering Storm expansion. I will not be assuming that you have the New Frontier Pass. We might talk a little bit about some of the differences in the game if you don't have the Gathering Storm expansion and or the Rise and Fall expansion. But for the most part, it's going to be the Gathering Storm edition, which is available as part of the Platinum edition. So this first episode, I want to be talking about game setup for a complete novice. So this is the first screen you'll see as soon as you start up the game. We're going to click continue. And here you have the main menu. So the first thing you're probably going to want to do is check out your settings. I've set all my things mostly to the default. I've just turned down the music and turned off the advisor for now. If you're a new player, you probably want to locate this advisor thing and make sure it's set to one of these options, whether you're new to Civilization 6, Rise and Fall, or Gathering Storm. I'm just going to disable it. And you might turn on animated time of day. I think it's defaulted to be off, but it just makes a nice little day-night cycle in the game. Set your graphics to whatever you need to. I've set it to ultra, audio, language, everything is there that you need, but the defaults should mostly be fine. Next, you'll want to check out additional content. Go to mods. I have a bunch of mods installed. Some of them are official mods from Firaxis. These include the Rise and Fall expansion, which I'll have enabled, I'll assume is enabled, and the Gathering Storm expansion, which I assume is enabled. And most of the other official mods are civilization packs, like Australia, Aztec, Babylon. Some of these you'll probably have. I've just decided to disable everything, and also some scenario packs. I'll show you how to use these scenarios, but for now, I've just disabled everything there, and oops. And those are the official mods from Firaxis. Of course, from the Steam Workshop, you can download all sorts of other mods, player-created mods. Some of them I recommend just to enhance the user interface and other things, just make for interesting different games. But I have everything disabled for now, so when I jump in the game, it'll be just like what you can expect without any mods. Um, and in general, if you do have mods, whenever you start up a game, you probably want to check to see which mods are enabled or disabled. Sometimes when mods are updated, they'll become automatically enabled. So I always like to check that before I start a game. If you don't have any mods, if you haven't subscribed to any mods on Steam, then it won't automatically subscribe you or enable any mods. Um, the last thing, well, I guess by clicking on the tutorial, we automatically get a little video. The last thing I wanted to say about the main menu is that there is a tutorial screen. You have a couple of tutorials here. You could play as Cleopatra, and that'll focus on empire building, or you could play as Gilgamesh, which will focus on military. The tutorials don't explain everything about the game. You won't get a full playthrough or anything like that. I would say that they're mostly useful if this is your first experience with any sort of strategy game or any 4X game like Civilization. If you are familiar with Civilization, you've played previous editions of the game, or if you've played other similar strategy or 4X games, then these tutorials might be pretty basic for you. They're going to be telling you things like right click to move units and uh, build builders to improve things. But if you're used to Civilization, then these you might be able to skip these. But I'm not going to be playing them, but you have the option here, and it's just right under tutorial. So what I actually want to do today is show you how to set up a single player game. So one thing you could do is just click play now, and it's going to put you on a small continents map with random leaders. You will have a random leader. And importantly, I believe play now will always be at Prince difficulty. That's that's a medium difficulty. It's level 4 of 8, and it's balanced between you and the AI leaders. So you have the same start, you have the same conditions. There are no modifiers one way or the other. And if you're familiar with strategy games with Civilization or 4Xs in general, you might be able to just click play now and jump into the game and have no problem with Prince difficulty. But I'm assuming that you are a complete beginner or that you're interested in this as a complete beginner. So instead of clicking play now, you probably want to click create game. So here you have the basic options. To start with, you need to choose your rule set. So if you have Gathering Storm installed and enabled, this should be the default, Expansion Gathering Storm. If you don't have these enabled, the expansions, that is, the standard rules will just be the vanilla version. If you have Rise and Fall, that'll be the default. If you have Gathering Storm, that'll be the default. Note that you don't need Rise and Fall to have Gathering Storm. Gathering Storm does use some mechanics that were introduced in Rise and Fall, but those mechanics, where necessary, will be included with Gathering Storm anyway. So if you are wondering which expansion to get, I would recommend Gathering Storm before Rise and Fall, just because that Gathering Storm comes with a lot of Rise and Fall mechanics. But ideally, I would say you would have both expansions, and they're both available as part of the Platinum Edition bundle. So I recommend getting both if you can. If not, at least Gathering Storm. The base game, of course, is fun as well, but I feel like the expansions, and especially Gathering Storm, really flesh out the game in a way that make it more fun to play. So I am going to be using this default expansion Gathering Storm rule set. The next thing you need to do is choose a civilization. Of course, you can always leave it as a random leader. And if you don't particularly care who you play, or if you're not sure who to play, nothing wrong with going with a random leader. Many beginner players like to have some guidance about who they should play. These are all of the civs that you can play as, all of the leaders you can play as, with just the main expansions, none of the add-on content that we saw under the mod section, the official mod section. And my first piece of advice is really just play whoever interests you. So if you want to play as the Mongols, play as Genghis Khan. If you want to play as Egypt, play as Cleopatra. But if you do want some idea, if you want to play, an easier civ to play rather than a more difficult one to start with, I do recommend Rome with Trajan as a good learner civ, because some of their abilities are fairly automatic. I won't go into much detail here. If you'd like more detail about any particular civ, please leave a comment, and I'd be happy to go into detail about a particular civilization's bonuses and how to play them. In fact, I might continue this whole series by doing breakdowns of individual civilizations. I also have several series on how to beat deity with various civilizations, so I'll plug that here. But Rome's abilities are pretty automatic, and you don't really have to think about them much, and he just does well by doing what's pretty intuitive anyway, which is spreading out, settling cities, and possibly attacking your neighbors. So Trajan is a good early civ, good early leader with Rome as a good early civ. I would also say some other civs with strong early games are pretty good, such as Gilgamesh, starting with war carts, which you can make from the beginning of the game. And if you make several war carts to start, you can explore the map, you can deal with barbarians, you can deal with other civs. So there's lots of things you can do. I am just going to, so those are a couple of my starter civ recommendations. Again, I would say go with whoever speaks to you, whichever civ is your favorite. And at least, with your first few games on an early difficulty, the priority should really just be trying things out, seeing what you like doing, trying to have fun. Don't stress out too much about winning, I would say, or playing optimally with your civilization. So that's why I wouldn't worry too much about who to pick. I'm just going to pick a random leader for now. The next big decision you have to make is to choose your game difficulty. Like I said, the default is Prince difficulty, which is the 4th of 8, from Settler all the way down to Deity. And I do think that if you have strategy game, civilization, or 4X experience, that Prince is a reasonable starting difficulty. As I said, the player and the prince AIs start with all of the same conditions. They start with one settler and one warrior each, and there are no hidden bonuses to either the player or the AI. When you get down to the difficulties above Prince, especially Deity, the AI start with more settlers, with more military units, and at each level, they get bonuses to things like combat strength of their military units, and bonuses to their yields. We'll talk about yields in a bit, but they're the basic things like production, science, culture, and all those things that you need to win the game. So the AI doesn't really get smarter with these different difficulty settings, but rather there's modifiers given to the AI as you get harder past Prince. As you get easier beyond Prince, the player you get bonuses instead of the AI getting bonuses. So if you're playing at settler difficulty, you will get some bonuses to your yields. You won't start with extra settlers or warriors, but you will get bonuses that will help the game a lot. So if you're totally new to Civ or you're just not super confident, I would recommend picking settler just so you don't have as much to worry about and you can play through a whole game just trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't that way, and without the stress of dealing with a higher difficulty. And you can very well, I would say, play a game at settler. If you beat settler, try chieftain, try warlord, etc., as far as you can. At higher difficulties, emperor, immortal, deity, you start to need some strategies. You start to have to really know the game mechanics in order to compensate for the AI's advantages. But for settler, for chieftain, and some of these lower difficulties, you can very easily just play the game, do what makes sense. You don't have to really dig deep into the mechanics or know every little detail to win a game or to play a game and just have fun. So I'm going to set it to settler difficulty for now. Choose your game speed. Standard game speed, the game is 500 turns long, and after 500 turns, the game will end, at least by default. And whoever has the highest score at that point, if no one's won another victory, whoever has the highest score wins. On multiplayer, online speed is the standard, and online speed is half the time or 100% plus the speed. So it doubles the speed. So online, the game takes 250 turns. With quick, I believe it takes like 330 turns, something like that. And if you want a longer game, you can play epic or marathon, which would take even longer than standard 500 turns. And with the changing game speed, the costs of things also change. So standard is the baseline, and it's a 500 turn game. In online speed, everything costs roughly half to produce. So even though the game is shorter with 250 turns, units will cost less, both in terms of production and in terms of gold. And technologies and civics, which you unlock with science and culture, will also be reduced. So at turn 200 of online speed, you should probably be about the same place you would be at turn 400 of standard speed. So that would be something like the atomic era or the information era, some late game place. I'm just going to pick standard speed here. Like I said, if you're playing multiplayer with friends, online speed is the default. But if you're playing by yourself, I do recommend standard speed, just because the online speed can be a little quick, and you get more turns to make more choices that might be impactful at the standard speed. But if you don't want to spend lots and lots of hours on the same game, first of all, Civilization might not be the game for you, but if it is and you just want a quicker experience, do feel free to pick quick or online speed. And if you want a longer experience, if you really like the ancient era and you want to spend more time there in the early eras, feel free to pick epic or marathon. The next decision is to choose your map type. If you click this, you get a whole page with lots of different map types. The standard is continents. This roughly corresponds to something like an Earth style map with a couple of big land masses. So just like on the Earth map, which you can also select here, you've got North America and South America connected, which is one main landmass, and then you've got Africa, Asia, Europe over here. That's another major landmass, and of course you would have Australia as well, and some Antarctica. Uh, the continents map is going to be randomized, but it's going to be similar to this, where you're going to have mainly two main continents, maybe a third, maybe a few islands here or there. But you're going to have roughly, half of your civilizations on one half of the world, and the other half on the other half of the world, with ocean in between. And that ocean, you won't be able to cross the ocean except for a few civs until the Renaissance era. We also have lots of other options. Archipelago, which has lots of islands. You can get continents and islands. You can do Europe, so you can do um, maps that are based on real world locations. There are some other ones that have been disabled because I disabled some of the other expansions, but there's a Europe map, there's a Southeast Asia map. I believe there's an Australia map, although that might be specific to a particular scenario. And lots of other maps to choose from. You can explore them all on your own. Pangea is probably an important one to note. This is the default for online, mostly because they want you to be able to have player interaction from the start. So with Pangea, there's just one main landmass that everybody's on. You don't have to learn to cross oceans before you can find everyone. You can just find everyone by exploring the one big supercontinent that everyone's on. And if I will also recommend that if you want to play a kind of slow game where there's little interaction with other civilizations, you don't want to be surrounded by lots of other competing civilizations, then I might recommend Small Continents, where there's a chance you end up on a continent all by yourself, or maybe with one or only two other civs, depending on how many civs you have in the game. For this game, I'm just going to pick continents since that is the default for single player. You can also unlock, there's a world builder that has some maps that you can modify. There's a world builder so you can make maps of your own. You can download maps through the Steam Workshop, and you can click those and access those here. But the official maps are all right here. And I'm just going to pick continents. So again, just pick whatever map type sort of fits the experience you're looking for. Choose map size. The map size primarily, aside, obviously from affecting map size and how big the map is, how much space you have, the main thing this does is set a default number of players. So the default, again, is small, which defaults to 6 players. So that's going to be 1 player in single player and 5 AI. If you do standard, it's 8, so it's going to be 1 player and 7 AIs. And you can see that Huge has 12, Duel has 2 players. You can change the number of players, so you can, for instance, pick a duel-sized map and then add some computers to make a 4-player game on a duel-sized map, so everyone will be kind of crowded. Or you could do a huge map. Can you reduce the number of players? I'm not sure if you can reduce the number of players. I think you can, in which case you could do, say, a huge map, but take out some players, and then everyone starts with lots of territory. For this, I'm just going to stick with the default again, which is small. Game modes, this is something that's been added with the New Frontier Pass. If you like the game, I suggest checking out the New Frontier Pass. It comes with a bunch of new civilizations and a bunch of new game modes that do interesting things. There's one that makes disasters an even bigger part of the game. than they are in Gathering Storm. There's one that has secret societies. There's one that shuffles the tech and civics tree. Those are some interesting game modes, but as you can see, because I don't have the New Frontier Pass enabled or any of its constituent DLCs, that I don't have any game modes available, but don't worry about that. If you have the New Frontier Pass, they'll show up there and you can select them. I should have also mentioned that if you have any scenarios you want to play, like a different kind of civilization game, some of the official mods add scenarios which are kind of specific. So there's one that's like set in the Australian outback. There's one that's just Vikings. There's a Black Death scenario. Those would appear under this rule set thing if I had them enabled. So again, if you have more DLCs, you can change different rule sets, different game modes. The last thing on this default menu is disaster intensity. So Gathering Storm introduced a weather and climate mechanic that includes natural disasters, things like flooding, volcano eruptions. There is pollution in the game, and pollution causes global warming, causes the ice caps to melt and the sea levels to rise, introducing flooding. There are also tornadoes and blizzards, and disaster intensity just determines like how frequently and how damaging those natural disasters are. If you just want to turn it off, you can set it to 0. The default is 2. If you want to see a lot of natural disasters because it makes the game interesting, you can put it up to 4. And not only will they be more frequent, but at settings of 3 and 4, the some of the disasters are even bigger. So, for instance, you can get severe volcanic eruptions that can damage tiles 2 hexes away. The thing about natural disasters is that they damage tiles, they damage units, so they're something to watch out for. But at the same time, like real world natural disasters, while they do damage to your infrastructure, to your units, to people, they also do good things for the environment. So you get some river flooding on a floodplain. It might damage your units. It might destroy some of your improvements, like your farms. But there's a chance that it makes your tiles more fertile. It adds food yields to those tiles. With volcanoes, it can destroy some surrounding tiles, which again can affect your improvements or your districts. But it can also add science yields to those tiles and add production yields. So disasters aren't all a bad thing. So you don't have to worry about them entirely. They can be good for you as well. It's just kind of about how you utilize them and whether you take precautions against those natural disasters or try to utilize their benefits. I'm just going to leave it at the default of 2, which has natural disasters occurring, every so often, but not so much so that you get tired of seeing them or they really mess you up. They won't be too frequent or too disasterly at a setting of 2. I'm just going to leave it at that. If you're a bit scared of the natural disasters to start with, do feel free to dial it down to 0, but I'll leave it at 2. And with that, that's all you really need to do to start your game. You can click Start Game now if you've picked your leader, your difficulty, and these are just the defaults. That's fine. The main reason you might I've left everything default. That would be the same as the Play Now option. The only reason I wanted to jump into this like create game option was to set the difficulty to settler and to show you what these do. If you want, though, you can hop into advanced setup where you have more options. And I won't talk about everything on this screen, but you can do things like set not just your own leader, but you can set the leaders and civs that you'll be playing against. Like I said, you can add an AI player, you can remove an AI player, you can change the number of city states here, you can change some of the map settings. If you hover over them, they'll tell you what they do to the terrain, but I'll just leave those default for now. You can turn on or off victory conditions, and you can turn on a few other miscellaneous settings here that you can limit the turns. You can turn off the turn limit. You can turn off some of the more random elements to the start of the game. So you can turn off barbarians, for example, or tribal villages if you want. I do recommend leaving them in to start with, just because that's sort of the full game experience. But if you have trouble with barbarians in your first game or your first few games and you get sick of them, you can just turn them off by going to the advanced setup and clicking no barbarians. So you can really customize your game to suit your playstyle and suit your own interests. And you can look into some of these other settings as you feel like it. But I've said enough for now about game setup, so why don't we just start the game? And this is going to be the end of this basic tutorial. I will see you next time to jump into this game and talk about victory conditions.
To man taking his first upright steps, you have come far.